Hello and welcome to the Oregon Mountains on the Edge. So what we have here is the CRKT Chehalem, and that apparently gets its name from the Chehalem Mountains in Oregon, and named after one of the bands of the Aftalati Native American bands, so to speak, as far as I can find out. And that seems to make sense because this is an Eric Ochs designed knife, and he hails from Sherwood, Oregon. And so this is the second knife that I've reviewed from Eric Ochs. The previous one was the CRKT Avant, another CRKT knife, a knife that I liked so much that I ended up purchasing. But a little bit of the background of Eric Ochs in that review, so please check that out. But a little bit more about him. Grew up in Oregon, and apparently his father gave him his first knife when he was around 6 years old. And according to CRKT's website, he'd be hard-pressed to remember a day since then that he's been without a knife. Seems like my kind of guy, and another knife nut. And I mentioned this in the other review, and I'll mention it again, that according to his own words, he strives to produce rugged but elegant knives, and I think here's another knife that firmly falls into that category. Right, guys, so after that little bit of an introduction, I'm going to be doing the usual. I'll go through materials, dimensions, and weight, and then dive into design and attributes of this good-looking little knife. Right, let's get cracking. So we've got a blade. It's a budget blade. It's what you expect from CRKT. They tend to be budget knives. But we've got a blade steel of 8CR13 MOV. The handle is stainless steel, and pretty much everything else on the knife is stainless steel. So the clip, the screws, the backspacer isn't. The backspacer is G10. And in the pivot assembly, unfortunately, and again, that's my opinion, but unfortunately is Teflon or nylon, the washer in there. Right, let's go through dimensions and weight. So we've got a blade length of 70.33 millimeters, and that's 2.77 inches. Blade thickness of 3.25 millimeters, and that is 0.13 inches. Handle thickness is 10 millimeters, and that is 0.39 inches. Close length of the knife is 93.14 millimeters, and that's 3.67 inches. Overall length of the knife is 161.93 millimeters, and that's 6.38 inches. And then, as per usual, I will check the stated weight. So I've got the stated weight from CRKT. And we'll check that on my scale, get that sort of centered up and lined up right. And of course, cranked up. What are we on? We're on ounces. So let's see what I get here. 3.8 ounces, bang on. Exactly the same as CRKT stated. And let's see how that looks. What that looks like in grams, I get a little bit more, so 107.33s they stated. I get 110 grams. All right, well, close enough. There we go. So it is a little bit of a weighty knife, or seems a little bit weighty for such a small knife, but, you know, is it too heavy to carry? Well, of course not. That's not exactly heavy. So it's one of those knives that I think feels good and more solid because of that little bit of extra heft to it. I really do like that in a knife. So let's get that open and speak a little bit about the design. So, and I'm quoting now from CRKT's website. So in inverted commas here, they say, for an inspired designer, even discarded tools from a neighbor's garage can spark a big idea. And apparently, again, according to the website, antique hammerheads influenced the handle design, and I guess that's referring to that hammered look. And he does, and I mentioned this in the previous review, in that Avant review, he does, he being Eric Ochs, does seem to bring this into a few of his knife designs, and I mentioned that in the other one, and I've got it here, and this is the Avant, and in this particular case, you can see that same kind of finish, and I mentioned the fact that it sort of looked like hammered copper to me, but I suppose hammered metal, any metal hammered, I suppose. But you can see that on the backspacer of the Avant, and then the whole handle is treated like that on the Chehalem. So clearly something that he likes, and I must say, I do like as well. I think that looks very, very good. Right, let's get into the specifics. So, Blade shape, clearly a clip point blade, and we've got a hollow grind and a beautiful satin finish to the blade as well. So get that a little bit closer and maybe just tilt it so you can see that in the light maybe. So we've got the satin finish that sort of runs in that direction on the big ricasso, and then it obviously on that hollow grind runs, if I'm holding it in this plane, it runs vertically. The edge on the knife, beautifully neat, for a production edge. It's obviously not a mirror edge, but beautifully done, even and incredibly sharp out of the box. Big front finger choil, and of course a nice sharpening choil, so easy enough to keep that edge nice and neat. And do I have to mention it? You can clearly see the big hole in the blade, so that clearly hints at how you open this knife. But that hole also really beautifully finished off, so we've got a lovely, even, nicely finished off chamfered edge around that. Spine of the blade is squared off and crowned, so the area just in front of the handle, that area there, very squared off and actually even a little bit sharp on those corners. And then sort of forward of that hole, it is squared off again and also pretty sharp, and then you can see where the blade tapers off to the tip. But this little portion above that hole, that has actually been crowned, and that's quite interesting and good looking. The fact that you see a sort of squared off area and then a crowned area and then the squared off again towards the handle. It does look good and adds a little bit of interest to that blade. And that I mentioned the fact that it is a clip point, and boy, this certainly is a clip point blade. Well, a modified clip point, I suppose. Normally a clip point, you'd have the straight edge there where this hole pushes the spine of the blade a little bit up. Right, let's look at that handle. So the handle, sort of a very sort of smooth profile to it, and a very gentle drop to that handle, and nicely rounded all the way around the edge of the handle. So it does feel very good in hand, and obviously that hammered finish adds a little bit of texture to the handle, to the frame. So that gives you a little bit of grip and a little bit of purchase on that handle when you get it in hand as well. But those rounded edges mean that there's no sharp edges and no hot spots. Well, I say none. There is just where the little cutout is for the lock, just on that little corner over there, and you so often find that on knives, and it tends to happen more on budget. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've seen that even on expensive knives. But that little area just there is a bit sharp, but it doesn't really affect you. It doesn't bite you in any way when you get this knife in hand. And while I've got it in hand like that, let's just have a look at the size of it. So I've mentioned in other reviews that I have medium-sized hands. I wear a large glove, and you can see when I'm choked up on the blade, I very, very easily and comfortably get onto the knife. And this is a knife that wants you to hold it like that. It is clearly designed to be used like that. If you do want to get a little bit further for some odd reason, you want to get a little bit further onto the handle, that's what that looks like. And you can see then it's, for me, sort of a 3.5 type grip with my little finger falling off the back. But as I said, that's clearly how it's meant to be used, and I very, very comfortably get onto that handle. Big hands, you are, once again, you're gonna go towards the back of the handle of the knife. Right, what else? So the hardware on the knife, you can clearly see that finished in black, so that's a little bit of contrast in the design, and that looks very, very good. And those are all Torx screws, so easy enough to get into this knife if you want to. And then the pivot cap is the same on either side, also Torx, and you can see a little bit of extra interest on that with those 4 little sort of drilled holes around the outside, around the circumference of those pivot caps, and that also just adds a little bit of extra detail, a little bit of extra interest to the knife. Backspacer, G10, and we've got a bit of jimping on that, and that also very, very neatly done, and obviously the black matches the black of the other hardware, so that well considered and looks very good as well. Pocket clip, we've got tip up, right hand only, so that is not reversible. It is deep carry. You can see it's one of those wraparound type pocket clips, and it has been skeletonized and also very nicely done. So yeah, relatively decent amount of space behind that pocket clip, but what does help that is the fact that the clip has been countersunk and the screws have been countersunk as well, so all good there. Frame lock knife, obviously, and nothing unusual there. So because this is stainless steel, the frame, there's no need for the stainless steel insert because you've got stainless steel on stainless steel lockup anyway. And then you do have the little over travel stop on that lock as well. And nicely the way that the little relief cut is done on that lock as well. And you can see that sort of a little bit of a wave effect. Actually, that kind of emulates, matches the backspacer. That jimping also has a little bit of a wave look to that as well. So that also looks very, very good. No attempts to lighten the knife. So those that frame has not been milled at all. But like I said earlier on, I actually do like a knife with a little bit of heft to it. So to me, this feels knife. Yes, it does. It feels like a knife, but it does feel good. It feels nice. It's the word I wanted to actually say there. But it does feel good in hand, and I like the little bit of heft, and I think that sort of contributes to a knife being a good user and maybe a heavy user. So I think all really good on the knife, considering the fact that it is a budget knife. So you're going to get the budget blade steel, and it is stainless steel and not titanium, etc., etc., etc. But a very, very good, I think, all-round EDC size and style of knife. The comfort, very, very good. The only negative, and this is me perhaps, is the fact that we have the Teflon or nylon, whatever you want to call that, washers that are in the inside there. Now, this does result in a very smooth action, and typically on Teflon you do get a very smooth action, but it's not a free action. It's not one of those, it's never going to be sort of drop shuddy with all intentions. And if you want to spidey flick the knife, you can, and I have sort of on and off struggled with this. You kind of got to get a little bit of wrist action into it, and then you can do it. But a straight flick, oh, there you go, and there I did it. It's not the easiest knife to spidey flick. It's not a knife, as a knife would be if it was on bearings, or even if it was on phosphor bronze washers, which tend to loosen up and wear in and become extra smooth with time. And I wish they would do that. I really do wish on budget knives, guys like manufacturers like CRKT would just would it affect the cost that much just to put the little phosphor bronze washers instead of Teflon in there? And I think this would be even more appealing to me, and it might even be a knife that I would actually grab, and who knows, I might still, because it is an excellent price point, this knife. It really is dirt cheap, this knife, and it is good looking. It does feel good in hand, and it is a nice choice for an EDC, and it's probably one of those really sort of users, abusers, what's the correct word there? You know what I mean? One of those knives that you would you don't mind too much getting messed up, but still it looks good. It looks good and it feels good. So looking for a budget knife, here's one to consider. An excellent design, the fact that it does come from a designer, a known designer, Ochs Works, so Eric Ochs. Good design, looks good, and not expensive. Guys, and before I forget, let me just do what I always do around this point, and that is just give my thanks give my thanks to Blades and Triggers. So another knife that does come from Blades and Triggers. I really do appreciate the ongoing support of the channel. So check this and other CRKT knives and other brands of knives and other tactical goodies out at Blades and Triggers, their website, BNT Online. Right, so I think what's left for me to do is size comparisons, and then I'll do a little bit of a summary on my thoughts of the knife, and you've probably gathered that already. So the first one I'm going to start with is another budget knife, and this is a Ganzo, and a very, very similarly priced and sized and spec'd knife, I guess. And that spidey flicks absolutely beautifully because it runs on bearings, that knife. So for that kind of price, you can actually get a knife with bearings. So this is the Ganzo Firebird FH61, by the way. And what would you call that blade? Well, besides calling it dirty, modified Tanto or modified clip point. But you can clearly see that those knives, very, very similar in size. The Ganzo is a little bit thicker, but that's making use of G10 and liners, but also a nice consideration in that budget EDC hard use type knife. The Ganzo, by the way, uses D2 blade steel. Right, there's that. Another one that is similarly sized, and it was on my desk. Yes, there it is. And that is this, and this is the Fox Suru, another one of those small EDC, handy, lends itself to good hard use as well, type knives, but obviously a lot more pricey. It has the titanium and the carbon fiber, and I can't even remember what's this, M390 steel, but that just to give you a little bit of size of that. And then what else I had on my desk here somewhere. It's gone missing. There we go. The Spyderco Ambitious, and also a similarly sized knife, obviously a bit shorter, but kind of in that area. So that the Spyderco Ambitious. Right, then I'll use the usual knives that I always do use if I can find them on my desk. So there we go, is the Spyderco Manix 2, an altogether bigger knife. But just to give a little bit of perspective there. Right, and where's it? Oh, another one I thought was missing in action. And I have to say it, guys, I do have to say it, otherwise my day is not complete. I used this knife because it has been out for so long, and I think most people will be familiar with it, and that is the Benchmade Mini Barrage. Give you some more perspective there, and you can see that the Chehalem is a little bit small in all dimensions, and possibly... yeah, I think those are probably around about the same weight. And then this, a knife that I think everyone will be familiar with, or most people do, especially if you're a nice knife nut. That is the Spyderco PM3, the smaller version. Give you some perspective there too. Right, and I think that's it. That's all for the size comparisons, and then just general thoughts on the knife. Yeah, I really do like it. I think to me, it's a handsome design, and it's a practical design as well. Deep belly on that blade. It feels good in hand. It feels like it could be a good user. The downside again for me is just the decision to do the Teflon washes. I wish they would get away from that. And then, other than that, the rest of the knife is really, really very, very appealing. And again, for the price point, I still might add this to my collection as just that, kind of, like I say, everyday around the house hard use type knife. But just because it is a hard use and inexpensive knife that you don't perhaps care about getting scratched up doesn't mean it doesn't still have to be good looking. And that's the appeal of this, is that you've got that inexpensive budget knife that is still good looking and does still feel very good. Right, enough waffle, guys, and I think that's just about it on this knife, the CRKT Chehalem Eric Ochs design. So all that's really left for me to do is, once again, just thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it when you do share your time with me, and as I always do say, would equally appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so that you can be notified every time I release a new video. And guys, please do give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, because that does help with the algorithm. And other than that, you go well and God bless.